Right now, tucked into your lower back, you've got these two organs.
Yeah, each one is roughly the size of your fist.
Right. And they're currently hogging like 25% of your heart's resting energy, which is wild.
It really is.
And over the next 24 hours, they're going to filter your entire blood volume about 60 times over.
Processing upwards of 180 liters of fluid.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Almost everything you probably think you know about how they do it is completely wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We have this huge stack of fascinating medical and historical sources all about the anatomy and physiology of the kidneys.
It's a great topic.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today is to move way past that, basic textbook diagram you saw in high school biology.
You mean the two little standard bean shapes?
Right, the beans. We are looking inside the intricate, high-pressure sorting machines operating quietly inside your abdomen right now.
And that is the perfect place to start, honestly, because we really do need to shatter the biggest illusion right out at the gate.
The idea that it's just a filter.
Yeah. If you define a kidney purely as an excretory organ, like just a biological water filter that makes urine.
Which most people do.
Right. But you're using a definition that modern science left behind decades ago.
So what's the modern view then?
Well, modern nephrology views the kidney as a highly sophisticated endocrine gland. It essentially just moonlights as a filter.
Wait, really? I always thought of it as a mechanical filter. You're saying it's like a hormone factory.
A vital one, yeah. I mean, yes, it cleans the blood,
Right.
but because it receives such a massive share of your blood flow, it acts as the ultimate chemical sensor for your entire body.
Oh, wow. So it's monitoring everything.
Exactly. For instance, your kidneys are constantly monitoring the oxygen levels in your blood.
Okay.
And if oxygen drops, the kidneys produce this hormone called erythropoietin.
Erythropoietin. Okay, and what did that do?
It travels directly to your bone marrow and orders the production of more red blood cells.
So the organ I usually associate with, bathroom breaks is actually dictating my red blood cell count.
Yep. And it's managing your skeletal health, too.
Wait, bones? How?
Well, they activate vitamin D into calcitriol, and that is literally the only form your body can actually use to absorb calcium.
I had no idea the kidneys were involved in vitamin D.
Oh, it's crucial. But perhaps most importantly, they produce renin.
Renin. R-E-N-I-N.
Right. And this isn't just a simple chemical switch. Renin kicks off this massive, complex chain reaction in your bloodstream.
Okay, what kind of reaction?
It constricts your blood vessels and tells your body to retain sodium. So it is the master regulator for your entire systemic blood pressure.
That reframes things entirely. So the kidney isn't just a waste chute. I mean, it's a chemical mastermind.
It really is pulling all the strings.
But before we get into the microscopic details of how it achieves all this, we have to talk about the physical reality of where this is happening.
The gross anatomy.
Yeah, and the sheer mechanical demand it places on your body.
Let's start with the geography, because that alone clears up a lot of confusion. Anatomically, we describe them as retroperitoneal.
Meaning they sit behind something.
Exactly. They sit against the posterior abdominal wall, so outside the main peritoneal cavity that holds your stomach and intestines.
Oh, I see.
They're tucked roughly between your 12th thoracic vertebra and your 3rd lumbar vertebra.
Okay, so kind of mid-back.
Yeah, and your right kidney usually sits a bit lower than the left one.
Why is that? Just asymmetrical.
Mostly because your liver is this massive organ crowding the space on the right side. It just pushes the right kidney down a bit.
Which brings up a myth I see everywhere.
And
like whenever someone tweaks their lower back, they grab down near their pelvis and groan, "Oh, my kidneys are acting up."
oh, I hear that all the time. That is a classic misconception.
Right.
Yeah, your kidneys sit much higher than most people realize. They're tucked way up under your lower ribs.
So if your lower back hurts.
When you feel that typical lower back pain near your pelvis or your lower spine, it is almost certainly a musculoskeletal issue.
Like a pulled muscle from lifting a bog's wrong.
Exactly. It has absolutely nothing to do with your kidneys.
Good to know. And while we are on the topic of anatomical real estate, our sources mention the adrenal glands sitting directly on top of each kidney.
They do, yeah.
And adrenal literally means toward the kidney, right? So do they work together?
They actually don't. Functionally, they are completely unrelated.
Really? They're just wearing matching hats.
Basically, the adrenals are handling stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It's just an accident of embryological development that they end up sharing the same apartment building.
That is so weird.
I know, but they don't share a physiological purpose at all.
Okay, so they are high up in the back, totally separate from the adrenals. But here is the physical statistic that I am really struggling with.
Let's hear it.
A single adult kidney only weighs about 120 to 170 grams.
Tiny.
Yeah. Together, both of them make up less than 0.5% of your total body weight. But, like I mentioned at the start, they demand 20 to 25% of the heart's total resting cardiac output.
It's a huge disparity.
I need help with the physics here. I mean, if they are so incredibly small, wouldn't that sheer volume of blood at that pressure just tear an organ that small apart? Why do they need a quarter of my heart's effort?
So, to understand that, you have to stop thinking about blood flow as just a delivery system for oxygen and nutrients.
Okay.
Usually an organ receives blood simply to keep its tissues alive. But the kidney is different. It is a massive fluid processing plant.
So it's not just eating the food, it's sorting the mail.
Exactly. That 25% of your cardiac output isn't there to feed the kidney. It's there because the kidney has to process your entire blood volume continuously.
But what about the pressure?
Right. To prevent that pressure from tearing the organ apart, the internal plumbing acts as an incredible complex dampening and distribution system.
Okay, so how does it step that pressure down safely?
Well, when that intense volume of blood rushes in from the aorta through the main renal artery, it immediately hits a branching network.
Like a river splitting into streams.
Yes. The artery splits into segmental arteries, which divide further and run deep between the internal structures of the kidney.
Okay, making it more manageable.
And they keep branching. They wrap around the borders of the kidney's inner layers, splitting again and again.
Just continuously dividing.
Right. You are taking a raging river of blood and systematically subdividing it until it reaches millions of tiny microscopic vessels called afferent arterioles.
So you're forcing a fire hose through, like, millions of tiny high-pressure garden hoses.
That's a great way to put it, yes. You preserve enough hydrostatic pressure in those tiny hoses to force fluid out of the blood and into the filtration system.
But the organ doesn't explode.
Exactly, because you've dispersed the volume so widely that the delicate organ tissue isn't destroyed in the process.
Wow. You know, when I was reading through the gross anatomy to understand what happens after that filtration, the only way I could visualize the drainage system was to picture a tree turned upside down inside the kidney.
Actually, that is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Oh.
The kidney has an outer layer called the cortex and an inner layer called the medulla.
Right, and that medulla is organized into these cone-shaped segments called renal pyramids.
Correct.
So in my upside-down tree visual, those cone-shaped pyramids are the fruit.
Okay, I follow.
And the newly formed urine drips out of the tip of that fruit, the papilla, into little collecting cups called minor calyces.
Yep.
Those would be the twigs. And the twigs merge into major calyces, the branches.
And
Those branches all funnel together into one large chamber called the renal pelvis, which acts as the main trunk. And that trunk narrows down into the ureter, dropping the urine down to the bladder.
that is a perfect analogy. And that physical architecture is crucial for clinical reasons, too.
Like what?
Well, when a patient develops kidney stones, they're forming right there in the calyces and the renal pelvis.
Oh, ouch. Right in the twigs and branches.
Exactly. So the severity of the situation, whether it causes silent, gradual damage or excruciating, sudden pain depends entirely on where that stone sits in your upside-down tree.
So if it blocks a twig versus forcing its way down the main trunk,
Precisely. It changes everything clinically.
that makes perfect sense of the gross anatomy. I mean, we have the blood branching out to deliver the fluid and the upside-down tree draining the final product.
Right.
But we completely skipped over the actual magic trick.
The filtration itself.
Yeah. How does the fruit actually get made? Because the real work is happening entirely out of sight in a microscopic structure called the nephron.
Ah, the nephron. It is the fundamental functional unit of the kidney. You have millions of them.
Millions.
Yes. And it's here that we need to address another massive myth.
Hit me.
People intuitively think of the kidney as, well, like a biological bouncer at a nightclub.
Selectively grabbing toxins out of the blood and tossing them out.
Right, while letting all the good stuff stay safely inside.
Yeah, that is the standard pop science explanation. The toxin filter.
But it's completely wrong.
Really? Completely?
The filtration process in the nephron is entirely non-selective.
Okay, so how does it work?
The process begins at a microscopic tuft of those tiny high-pressure capillaries we talked about earlier. This tuft is called the glomerulus.
The glomerulus.
And it is wrapped in a cup-like sac called Bowman's capsule. Because the blood pressure inside that capillary tuft is so high, it literally forces blood plasma out through the vessel walls and into the capsule.
Just physically squeezing it out.
Yes, but it doesn't just push out waste. It forces out water, glucose, amino acids, and vital electrolytes right alongside the metabolic trash.
Wait, it just dumps everything.
Almost everything. The only things left behind in the blood vessels are the things physically too large to fit through the microscopic pores.
Like what?
Mainly large proteins and red blood cells.
Okay, wait, so instead of just picking the trash out of your room, it's like throwing your entire closet out the window into the yard.
Yes.
And then meticulously walking outside and carrying back in only the clothes you actually want to keep.
That is the perfect mechanical analogy. It is a massive, seemingly inefficient dumping process.
Seems crazy.
It does, but it's followed by an incredibly precise, energy-intensive reclaiming process.
How does the reclaiming work?
Well, once that fluid, which is now called the filtrate, leaves Bowman's capsule, it travels through a long, complex tube.
Hey.
It winds through the proximal tubule, dips deep into the kidney via the loop of Henle, comes back up through the distal tubule, and finally dumps into a collecting duct.
That's a lot of tubing.
It is. And as the fluid travels through that microscopic obstacle course, blood vessels wrapped around the outside of the tube are frantically pulling back all the good stuff.
They are carrying the clothes back into the house.
Yes, exactly. And they are using active transport to do it. The kidney cells are burning massive amounts of energy to pump sodium and glucose back into the blood.
And I guess water just follows the salt.
Naturally, yes. So filtering out toxins passively accounts for a tiny fraction of the kidney's physiological effort.
Because the vast majority of its energy goes into actively reabsorbing what shouldn't have been thrown out the window in the first place.
You've got it.
The math and the sources on this is just staggering to me. Like, in a healthy adult, the kidneys filter about 180 liters of fluid a day.
Right.
But of that 180 liters, 178 to 179 liters are meticulously carried back into the bloodstream.
It's incredible.
Only 1 to 2 liters actually leave your body as urine. Well over 99% of the kidney's job is just reclaiming.
It is a phenomenal feat of biological engineering, honestly, and it relies entirely on millions of those microscopic nephrons working in perfect concert.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh.
Yeah, you'd think a system this precise and critical would be, like, standardized.
Like a factory line.
Exactly. Where
Right.
every human kidney has the exact same number of these little nephron machines.
But they don't.
No. We looked at this landmark 1992 study by Danish researchers Nygaard and Benson. They found that nephron counts vary wildly between totally healthy individuals.
The degree of variation they found was an absolute shock to the anatomical community.
I mean, one person might have 200,000 nephrons per kidney, and the next person has 1.8 million.
That's almost a tenfold difference in the fundamental architecture of the organ.
And yet, both are considered anatomically normal. Plus, you're born with all the nephrons you will ever have, right?
Yep. They don't regenerate. The count is completely fixed by about 36 weeks of gestation.
That is wild.
We will explore the clinical implications of that shortly, because being born with 200,000 versus 1.8 million nephrons drastically changes how your body handles aging and disease.
I can imagine.
But you are right. It forces us to rethink how uniform the human body actually is.
It totally does. But looking at all of this, the fact that this filtration relies entirely on millions of microscopic, identical pressure chambers, it makes total sense why early doctors were completely baffled by kidney function.
Oh, they were totally lost.
When you look at a kidney with the naked eye, it just looks like a solid, fleshy mass.
Right.
Which is exactly why a Roman physician named Galen led us down the wrong path for 1,400 years.
Yes, Galen. Working in the 2nd century CE.
Long time ago.
Without microscopes, he could only guess based on the gross anatomy he saw during dissections.
So what did he think was happening?
He proposed what became known as the boiling sieve model. He believed that blood was essentially boiled or strained through the solid, fleshy substance of the kidney.
Like a sponge.
Kind of. He thought the urine separated out through the tissue the way whey separates from cheese curds.
Which, honestly, if you were just looking at a raw organ on a table, is a highly logical deduction.
It really is.
You see blood go in, you see yellow fluid come out, you assume the meat in the middle acts like a coffee filter.
It was entirely reasonable for the observational tools he had. The problem was his authority.
Right, nobody questioned Galen.
Galen's texts were considered medical gospel because nobody dared question him, and because nobody suspected there were discrete microscopic structures doing the real work. That boiling sieve model dominated medicine for roughly a millennium and a half.
Just completely stalled out.
It massively delayed any real physiological progress.
So the timeline finally starts to move in the 17th century. And I love how each major microscopic structure we just discussed still bears the name of the pioneer who found it.
It's a nice historical touch.
Right. In 1666, an Italian biologist named Marcello Malpighi gets his hands on an early microscope.
Okay.
He points it at a kidney and finds these tiny knots of blood vessels in the outer layer, the glomeruli. For centuries, they were actually called Malpighian bodies.
Yep, they were.
But then, we jump all the way to 1842. Sir William Bowman, an English surgeon, maps out the cup-shaped membrane wrapping around Malpighi's knots.
What we now call Bowman's capsule.
Exactly. And Bowman is the one who proposes that radical two-step model we just talked about. Filter everything out first, then selectively reclaim it along the tubule.
Brilliant deduction.
And finally, in the 1860s, Friedrich Henle maps out that deep U-shaped dive the tubule takes, which we still call the loop of Henle. But I am hung up on this timeline. 1666 to 1842. Why did it take 176 years just to connect the dots between Malpighi finding those microscopic knots and Bowman figuring out they were encased in a capsule?
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer skepticism surrounding new scientific technology.
Of microscopes.
Yeah. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the microscope was still a new and deeply distrusted tool.
They didn't trust the lenses.
Exactly. Many prominent anatomists simply didn't believe what they were seeing through the lenses. When Malpighi published his findings, a large portion of his contemporaries dismissed these little bodies as inconsequential artifacts.
They thought it was just a distortion from the glass.
Either optical distortions or just random, meaningless bumps of tissue.
Wow.
They couldn't fathom that these microscopic dots were the functional heart of the organ. It took generations for the scientific philosophy to shift.
To realize that the small stuff mattered.
For the medical community to accept that macroscopic function is entirely driven by microscopic architecture.
Okay, so once that philosophy shifts, we finally have the blueprint. We know the delicate architecture.
The glomerulus, the tubules, the million little sorting machines.
Right. And we know how hard-won that knowledge was. But understanding that architecture is exactly why modern kidney disease is such a crisis today.
How do you mean?
Because when you just look at a failing kidney from the outside, you have no idea which microscopic part is breaking down.
Precisely. And the modern understanding of that crisis begins with a British physician named Richard Bright in 1827.
Bright's disease, right.
He was the first to systematically correlate damaged internal kidney architecture, which he observed during autopsies, with specific clinical symptoms in living patients.
Like what kind of symptoms?
Severe swelling, high levels of protein in the urine, things like that.
So he essentially linked the microscopic damage to the macroscopic symptoms.
He did, and it was revolutionary. But in doing so, he accidentally created a new medical hurdle. For over a century afterward, almost all chronic kidney failure was simply lumped together under one umbrella term: Bright's disease.
Which our sources highlight as a massive historical mistake.
It was a huge step backward in precision. By lumping all kidney failure together, doctors obscured the fact that there are dozens of distinct diseases that attack the kidney in totally different ways.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Diabetic nephropathy, for example, specifically damages the delicate blood vessels in the glomerulus. It breaks the initial filter.
Okay.
But other diseases might attack the tubules, destroying the reclaiming process. Or genetic conditions might cause cysts that crush the surrounding nephrons.
So it's not all just one disease.
Not at all. Modern nephrology had to completely abandon the term Bright's disease because treating kidney failure based just on outside symptoms without knowing exactly which microscopic part is broken leads to ineffective, sometimes dangerous treatments.
You have to know if the window you are throwing the closet out of is broken, or if the person carrying the clothes back inside has tripped and fallen.
Exactly. But there is another layer to this architectural breakdown, and it revolves around a major misconception regarding how kidney disease actually feels.
Because most people assume that if a vital organ is failing, their body will send out alarm bells, right?
Right. They expect pain or immediate nausea.
And that is a dangerous assumption with the kidneys. Our sources emphasize this concept of functional reserve.
It's a huge factor.
Because you have millions of these nephrons, your kidney function can decline by 50% or more before blood tests show clear abnormalities.
And long before you actually feel sick.
Half your microscopic factories can permanently shut down before you even notice a drop in production. That's terrifying.
That is why chronic kidney disease is universally referred to in medicine as a silent disease.
Silent.
It is actively permanently destroying the microscopic architecture, but the surviving nephrons just work harder to pick up the slack.
So the patient feels fine while the organ is quietly losing its capacity.
Ex-
Which, incredibly, is the exact same physiological mechanism that makes living kidney donation possible.
Oh, absolutely.
You only really need one healthy kidney to live a normal life. If you donate one of your kidneys, that single remaining organ will actually ramp up its output,
It does. The remaining nephrons physically enlarge to compensate.
sustaining roughly 70 to 80% of your prior total function.
It is a remarkable biological failsafe. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, that failsafe is intimately tied to that 1992 study you brought up earlier.
One showing people are born with wildly different numbers of nephrons.
Yes.
The 200,000 versus 1.8 million count. How does that factor into the silent disease?
Well, in the 1980s, a researcher named Barry Brenner proposed what is now known as the Brenner hypothesis.
Okay, what's the hypothesis?
He argued that if you are born with a low nephron count, which is heavily correlated with being a premature baby or having a low birth weight, those fewer nephrons have to engage in what we call hyperfiltration.
Meaning they work overtime?
Exactly. From day one, your 200,000 nephrons have to filter the exact same total blood volume as someone else's 1.5 million nephrons.
Oh, wow. So they're constantly operating at maximum mechanical stress just to maintain baseline function.
Yes. And the hypothesis suggests that this chronic, lifelong overwork causes the delicate capillary tufts in the glomerulus to eventually scar and burn out.
That makes a lot of sense.
This dramatically increases that person's risk for high blood pressure and chronic kidney disease later in life.
Because their functional reserve is naturally much smaller.
Exactly. So they hit that critical threshold of organ failure much sooner.
So your risk for a silent chronic disease at age 50 might have been pre-programmed by your birth weight and your initial nephron count.
That's the theory.
That is a heavy concept. It shows how deeply our macroscopic health relies on this microscopic lottery.
It remains an active area of research, but it has huge clinical stakes today. It is the reason pediatricians so closely monitor the kidney health and blood pressure of kids born prematurely.
They know the architectural reserve might be inherently lower.
Precisely.
Well, we have covered an incredible amount of anatomical ground today. So what does this all mean? Let's synthesize this journey for you.
It's a lot to take in.
We started with a basic bean shape and discovered an endocrine powerhouse that commands a quarter of your heart's effort.
And we learned that the toxin filter idea is a total myth.
Right. And that filtration and reabsorption are two massive, entirely separate jobs, throwing the whole closet out the window and spending massive amounts of energy to carefully bring back the clothes.
We learned that the architecture is entirely microscopic, which baffled ancient doctors for 1,400 years.
We also learned that modern kidney diseases are dangerously silent because of our functional reserve. And when you think about it, a modern dialysis machine is really just a desperate mechanical attempt to build an artificial glomerulus and tubule.
You've captured the core physiology perfectly. But there's one final fascinating detail from the source material that I think really challenges how we view human anatomy as a whole.
Oh, I am all ears.
We tend to think of the human body as having a fixed, perfectly engineered, grand design. You know, a flawless blueprint that never changes.
Sure.
But in about 1 in 500 people during fetal development, the two kidneys actually fuse together at their lower poles before they ascend into the back.
Wait, they fuse together?
Yeah, they form a single, large, U-shaped organ known as a horseshoe kidney.
A single U-shaped kidney. How does that even function?
In most cases, it functions perfectly fine. It still has 2 separate collecting systems and 2 ureters draining the urine.
Oh.
But because it's a large U-shape, as it tries to ascend into its proper retroperitoneal position high in the back during fetal development, it gets physically caught on a major artery.
What? Which artery?
The inferior mesenteric artery. It literally hooks around the blood vessel and can't go any higher.
That's wild.
So it ends up sitting much lower in the abdomen near the pelvis than normal kidneys.
It gets snagged on the body's internal plumbing on its way up.
It does, and I invite you to really ponder that, because it shows us that gross anatomical position isn't always the result of some flawless, grand blueprint.
Sometimes it's just an accident.
Sometimes the structures inside us are just the chaotic, accidental product of embryological migration.
What an incredible thought to end on. that perfect textbook diagram we started with. It's not just vastly oversimplified, sometimes it's completely structurally different, snagged on an artery, quietly acting as an endocrine factory and filtering 180 liters of blood a day anyway.
It's an amazing machine.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden, high-pressure world inside you. Keep questioning those textbook diagrams, and as always, stay curious.